Good morning, everyone. Saya, thanks for turning your video on. Anyone else who's around, you guys can start turning on your videos. Perfect. Good morning, Zadie. Well, I think we might get going and then other people will just miss the beginning. So can you guys go ahead and throw your special listening into the chat? We'll come back to that later. But go ahead and type it in. Piece, composer, or artist, and around the year that it was composed or recorded. Sonata in C major. Oh, the Bravail Sonata. Great one. So for those just coming in, go ahead and turn on your video and then add your special listening to the chat. Rosa, is that the Allemande that goes da 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 do dee do do dee da 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 da? See if Rosa's around. Hey Rosa, I was wondering if that Allemande was the one that goes da 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 dum ba 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 ba, or does it sound different than that?
I think it sounds different than that, but I might.
There's one famous one that goes like.
No.
Trying to think of one by Mozart. For everybody else, we're adding special listening to the chats.
What if I didn't really listen to anything other than the Suzuki soundtrack over the week?
Okay, put one from the Suzuki CD. That's music too. Mm, 1812 overture. Nice, in the Black Double. Very cool. Oh, this is great. We're gonna see a lot of stuff by Mozart today. We're gonna see stuff by Bach. No Tchaikovsky today. Good. Okay, I'm gonna play mine real briefly, and then we'll get started. So this is by Devendra Banhart.
Too late to tell it, it's too soon, and the future's being born right here in this room. Press the button of world peace and wipe out everything but the moon. Ooh. Like a flower on an eastern block, living from birth to birth. That's all the love that some of us know. That's all the love some know. All the death in my house.
Okay, I love that song. Somewhat related to Marquez, this is a Venezuelan composer, songwriter, poet. We're gonna get to how he is related to today's music. Great. So everybody who's here, go ahead and turn on your video so we can get started and I can see your faces. I'm gonna share my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see PowerPoint. Yay. Cool. So last time we talked a lot about the development of instruments, right? We found our own instruments in our house. We played them for each other. And then we went through some history of musical development. Do you guys remember how old this flute was over here? Turn on your mic and say it if you remember. $55,000 years old. We've been making music with instruments for a long time. This was the tromba marina. It's like a trumpet that's bowed. This was the viol, the precursor to the violin. And this was some awesome sort of homemade instrument made by the Gan people in Africa. So we're going to carry on with our discussion of Baroque instruments versus classical instruments, or basically the old instruments and then what we play now. So go ahead and share with me what you remember from differences between Baroque and classical. Yeah, Zadie.
Well, over time, some of the instruments were modified a little. Because like when you, the Baroque like cello, it has like a different tone than.
Do you remember what was different about the tone?
What?
Do you remember what was different about the tone?
I think the Baroque instrument was more deep, like it had a deeper sound.
Yeah, deeper, richer, a little bit softer too.
It also didn't have an end pin.
Yeah, so they were holding it up with their legs. Yeah, what else? Hey, Michael, what were the strings made out of during the Baroque period?
Sheep guts.
Yeah, sheep guts, and then some of you knew of cat guts too, but animal intestines. Versus the classical instruments, what are the classical strings made out of?
I forgot.
Wound steel.
So yeah.
Metal, which might be sort of what Zadie was saying with the deeper, richer, softer sounds coming from the Baroque instruments versus the modern instruments, because they have that sort of organic core versus the steel core. Hey, Claire. Hi, everybody. Okay, what else do we remember? Baroque versus classical. Yeah, lady.
I don't think this was part of the discussion, but I'm pretty sure that what is it? I forget what it's called, but I think it starts with an M. But like it was like this in the Baroque area, it was like this different kind of like piano, except it wasn't piano until someone invented the piano.
Oh, I'm so glad you're saying this. Yes, pianos didn't exist until the classical music period.
Yeah.
They had harpsichords. Is
Yeah,
that what you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that.
But y'all might have remembered Sarah's son Owen built a harpsichord. Did she tell you all about this? Yeah. So that's so that's the instrument that they played at that time. It was basically a harp, hence the name harpsichord, laid down flat. And then instead of you plucking the strings with your own fingers, they would make a metal hook and like pluck each string as you push down the key. So it'd be like if you want to play the A string on the harp, you would push down the key and it would hook and pull up the A. So you can imagine the whole thing sounds like ding 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 as you go up and down. Very different from the piano sound, which is a hammer that comes down on the string and makes a sort of a bell or a gong sound on the instrument. So yeah, you're exactly right. Harpsichords were the instrument of choice during the Baroque period. What about on the instrument itself? Was the fingerboard as long as it is on the modern violin? No.
It was shorter.
Yeah, they only came to here because they didn't play as high up, and it wouldn't have been
in first position.
Right. They did a lot of stuff here, especially on the cellos and the basses. Right. And then the C bouts themselves weren't as well defined. So ours are very pointy. Theirs were more round. And then the bows. So let me show you my two bows. This one you'll recognize. That's what the tip looks like. This is what the frog looks like. And there's that much hair. Compare that to this bow. This is what the tip looks like. This is what the frog looks like. And check this out. The hair comes all the way down to here. Look how rounded everything is. And then very thin hair. So compare these two. I guess it's a little bit hard to see, but there's definitely more thick hair on the modern French bow than there is on the old German Baroque bow. And then the last detail that's probably most important is on a modern bow, as you all know, if you tighten it correctly, you'll have a swoop to the inside like a smile. So you have an arch coming to the inside. The old Baroque bows were built like bows and arrows. So the swoop actually goes this way, like a frowny face, right? Or like if you were going to pull back a bow and arrow. So it really changes the sound. Let me play a little bit for you with the modern bow and a little bit for you with the Baroque bow, and you tell me if you can tell a difference. So this is the modern. And here's with Baroque. Hear that? Hear any difference? Yeah. So with the bow going this way, the strongest part of the bow is in the middle. The clever invention with the modern bow is that you are able to distribute the weight and tension at the frog and at the tip, no problem. So you can get a really thick romantic sound. A lot of control up at the tip. Almost impossible to do that with a Baroque bow. You get much more of a brush stroke, or it's quite a bit easier to bounce, which is why probably that a lot of you, when you were learning Bach and Book 3 and Book 4 and Vivaldi, were taught to do more lifted strokes and brushing. Or in like Kirsten Marshall's class, remember all of that like upper arm movement? That's all imitating the Baroque style, which was so easy with these Baroque bows. Okay? So what's fascinating to me is that I can play on a modern violin the same music on both things, and you can tell a difference even with the bow. And so imagine what the difference would be if you were playing also on a Baroque cello, just Baroque music, etc. All right. Any more thoughts about the or questions about the difference between Baroque and classical instruments? No? Okay. So pull out a piece of paper and something to write with. And number it 1 through 6. We're going to play a little game where you all guess which of the two things I show is the Baroque thing, which is the old style versus the new style. All right. Game, which one is Baroque? So it'll be an A or a B, and you choose which one you think is Baroque. Here's option 1. Okay, here's option number 2, or sorry, B, option A, option B. Okay, so you pick which one you thought was Baroque. Moving on to the next. A is this side of bows. B is this side of bows. Which one are the Baroque bows?
A?
Yeah, definitely. You can just write it on your paper. Here comes number 3. here's B on number 3. So write down which one you think was Baroque, A or B. Here's option B for number 4. Okay. Moving on to number 5. So there's 2 pictures. Which one is Baroque? Letter A or letter B? Okay, and here's the last one, number 6. Here's option A. And here's option B. Okay, so who thought that was hard?
It was sort of hard in some of them, but most of them were easy.
Do y'all agree? Yeah, I feel the same way too. Like, first of all, if you can see the difference, like what the instruments look like, that makes a huge difference.
There
And
were
then-
some of them where they were just too far away to see.
Yeah, and then another like easy out is that if you see somebody playing a harpsichord, or if you see somebody playing a drum, if you see something that you don't recognize, it's probably Baroque, right? And then there's the sound quality difference that Zadie talked about. Okay, so let's go through each of them just so you can know. So number 1 is definitely A. That was the Pachelbel's canon, where one of them was on piano and like very romantic cello, and then the other one was with the whole little sinfonietta. Number 2 was the pictures of the bows. We just talked about it, right? So the tip like this, that's definitely Baroque. So that would be answer number A. Again. Number 3. Oh yeah, this is the Vivaldi. So the first option was Maxim Vengerov, who somebody listened to for their special listening. Maxim Vengerov playing with 3 other winners of some competition, playing a Vivaldi piece with a whole gigantic orchestra. That was definitely modern. The Baroque was the Armonico Italian group playing very Baroque style. What I think is super exciting, Vivaldi. Number 4, that was the La Folia. Who here plays La Folia? Some of y'all, yeah. So was it interesting to hear this in 2 different styles?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
my favorite Suzuki piece.
I love it too. It's one of the best pieces of all time, in my opinion. Just an amazing piece. So one was played by a modern violinist, that was letter A. Letter B was period instrument orchestra. That was the one with the drum, the harpsichord, the harp, and a standing bass as well. Number 5 was the picture of the cellos. B was definitely the Baroque one. I had the short fingerboard, no in pin. And lastly, number 6, that was Musette. Who's played Musette? Yeah. The first one was Rachel Barton Pine's daughter, playing Musette in the Baroque style with a basso continuo underneath. So A was the Baroque answer. B was a modern violin, playing in the sort of what we come to expect as standard way. But this is what I want to talk about. So especially with these Suzuki pieces, we're playing Bach, Vivaldi, Handel. All of these composers wrote music before the modern violin, modern cello, modern stringed instruments existed. So everybody who played their music was playing them on Baroque instruments. It was only after we transitioned to modern instruments that we started playing their old music on the modern violin. So what do you all think? Do you all think that we should perform their pieces with Baroque style, Baroque instruments, or with modern instruments because that's what we have? Or should we change the style that we play in any way? I want to know your ideas.
Don't they already change the style that we play in a little bit? Like they
How
make
so?
it softer at the tip because they want you to play it like they would have way back when.
So what
I don't think there's anything wrong with playing them on modern instruments because that's what we have, right? Like if you have a Baroque instrument, that's perfectly fine, but like most people don't.
I think both are fine. Like they're both different, but that's fine. It's cool to have like different ways to play different things and be able to like listen to different sounds of things.
Does anybody think it's not okay to play Bach's music in a modern style on a modern instrument? Because when you guys learned this piece by Bach, anything Baroque about that? I'm playing it with my modern bow on my modern violin, and I'm playing it in that romantic, very sticky tone sort of thing that Suzuki loves. Okay, so there's nothing Baroque about that. But I bet when some of y'all learned La Folia, or when you played like the Bach cello suites, you started learning spiccato, brushstrokes, you started learning Baroque techniques. So now when we go back to play Minuet 1, like Sky talked about, we have a choice. We have decisions to make. Do we want to play in a Baroque style, or do we want to play in a modern style? So what would you choose now? So if I could like ask you to play Minuet 1 for the class, what sort of decisions would you make? Like if I gave you a Baroque instrument, would you want to try out? Who would want to like play on a Baroque instrument? Okay, yeah, pretty much everybody. Just it's interesting. Okay, and then who would, if they went back to Minuet 1, actually try to play this Baroque style but on their modern instrument? Who would make that decision? No. Okay, and then
Like how it sounds good.
but it's so tricky, right? Because we also didn't have recorders back then. So there's this whole other layer, like meta level of like, well, everybody who thinks they're playing in the Baroque style is just making up what they think the Baroque style used to be in the modern context. So it's all kind of messy. It's all kind of messy. But I want to see about having us experiment with Baroque instruments. So do we all have our violins and cellos and violas out? Go ahead and grab your instrument.
I can't play right now because I have an injured hand.
Oh, that's too bad. This is through and talking, right?
Yes.
Okay. One thing that you can do is are you able to move your arm through space at all?
What? Sorry, what?
Are you able to move your arm through space? Like not hold your bow, but...
Yeah, I can, but not really use a bow because it's mainly in my hand, not in my arm.
Okay, well keep your hand stabilized, but get this feeling of swing, swing, swing. Like that through, okay?
Okay.
And then you could sort of imagine that you're bowing along with us, but don't compromise your hand. Okay, so for those of us who are playing with a bow, this is called a choked up bow hold. So you take your bow hand from the normal position and pull it up a couple of inches, like definitely above the grip. This is true for cellos or violins. That's it. And then we're gonna play, even with that, sort of in the middle, halfway between our tip and our bow. And this is going to give us that feeling of lightness that you would get with a Baroque bow. Okay. And now just do on an open D string, down, up, up, and scoop every single note. Get lots of air in your sound. Now, one thing that the Baroque period is known for is these amazing backbones. Like La Folia is a chord progression that's a backbone behind all of the ornaments. And the ornaments sit on top. They're less important. So when you do this is your backbone. And then we're going to add a little ornamental flourish. And because you're so light with the bow, you can do all these amazing tricks, right? Try coming up with your own rhythmic ornament to add to this down bow, up bow. Great, let me hear some of these strokes. Who would like to go first? Rosa, you're closest to the camera. May we hear your stroke?
Sure. I mean, weird.
Awesome. And the lighter your bow and arm is, the better we'll hear the crispiness of the way the stroke is spoken, rather than like glued to the string like romantic. But light, something like that. Can you show us one more time, Rosa? Be super, super light. Yeah, that da 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 da. That's so Baroque. Great. Zadie, could you show us your interpretation?
Of what? I don't really understand. I don't.
So just do on open D, find some rhythmic patterns that you can do with a very light hand in your new choked up position. Yeah, do another one. Yeah, beautiful. Great. Could we hear a cellist? Oh, Saya, can you go first? That's it, exactly. And what does it sound like if you do the down, up, up on the cello? Ah, doesn't that just melt your heart? It's like cloudburst. It's so beautiful. Okay, let's hear our other cellist. Well, I guess we don't have Claire on, but Lucia, do you want to go? Yeah, don't be afraid to let it skim on the string. So in Baroque, we have the important backbone, and then the ornaments are just ornaments. So let them be light and skimmy if you want. That's beautiful. And let's hear Sky's version. Oh, Sky, you don't want to go now? Okay. Claire, would you be willing to go? Yeah, really beautiful. I love these cello sounds. So let's do everybody muted. You guys play along with me doing Minuet 1. We'll do it in G major. Cellist, do y'all play it in G major or C major? C or G? Okay, we'll try it in G major. You can play along. Choke up your bow hold. Light and skimmy. Use the backbone of the stroke, but everything else is just ornamental. I'll play an introduction. Let's start on the note G for the cellist this time. Right? So start on the note G. 1, ready, go. saying you need to like one period more than another. I think like what Sky said is that they're different. And now that y'all are mature musicians, you can make the choice of how you want to play. So perhaps when you're doing your review, add in some of this Baroque style playing to your repertoire. To me, playing a Baroque piece in the Baroque style can be almost more exciting than playing it in a modern kind of way. Almost always is more exciting. All right, so let's continue on with what happened after the Baroque period. You can set down your instruments. So the reason that we even say Baroque period is because something came after. We'll call that the classical instrument. And this is the instrument that you all have all heard of. It's the Stradivarius, the Strad. Very famous Italian violin maker. Came up with the definitive ratio, proportions, build, wood type of our modern day violin. Every violin, cello, viola that you all will ever play is modeled after the Strad. There are also some other Italians, Amati and Guarneri, who were just as equally skilled, perhaps not as notably famous. So just give you an idea of how much our culture, our classical community respects Stradivarius, I want you to watch this video. And the video, yes, is about the instrument itself, but also take note of how much awe and respect these European men give this violin.
In nearby Bergamo, Igor found me a Stradivari violin to play. It's owned by a Swiss bank and is now for sale for $15 million. The mayor wanted to bring it to me himself to play at the Church of San Pietro.
Signore, buongiorno.
Looks very nice.
Yeah, it looks
In very good condition.
well
too.
preserved.
Yeah. Let's try if it works. Good.
feels good.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a Strad.
You hear the quality, this incredible.
They don't make them like this anymore, do they?
No, no way. Genius is genius.
He was the best in 1714. He was the best in 1737 when he died, and he's still the best.
And he will stay the best.
I think I'd like to play a couple of notes on this.
Yeah, yeah.
So that was a video. That is literally the most famous violin of all time. And it's worth noting, I mean, you guys heard how much they are in respect and awe of this violin, right? So classical musicians have put this form, the Stradivarius violin, on a pedestal. It's like the special, most amazing violin ever. You even heard them say, they don't make violins like this anymore. So the violin as an instrument peaked in 1736. 1714, 1736. That was the most advanced the violin could ever get. So in a sense, we also have this feeling in classical music like it's frozen back in history. It's a past tense thing. It already had its climax, and we're just continuing on the heritage of violin playing, right? We're just treating the Stradivarius instrument with respect. Okay, but as I already mentioned, Bach died in 1750, and imagine this is the 1700s, so it's not like somebody makes this violin and everybody knows about it, right? Word doesn't travel that fast, and the instruments definitely aren't made that fast. So this happens, he dies in 1750. All of his music was played on these prior instruments before the Stradivarius became the instrument to play. Beethoven also, not Beethoven, Haydn, Vivaldi, Corelli, who wrote La Folia, all of these people died in the early 1700s before they would have heard their music on it. So does anybody know who the composers are late 18th century, early 19th century, like at the end of the 1700s, beginning of the 1800s, who would have actually heard this violin being played? Anybody know those composers who came after Bach?
I don't know, but maybe the guy who wrote Humorous.
Yeah, Dvorak. Dvorak is significantly later. He's like the end of the 19th, end of the 19th century, so like the 1880s, 1890s, 1900s. One of them is written on this slide right here. Mozart, yeah. So Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, those are big classical era composers.
Yeah, also Wagner.
Wagner would come sort of in Dvorak's time, in the Romantic period, but definitely he came later. So here's Anne-Sophie Mutter playing a Mozart violin concerto. This is in our Suzuki books for the violins. You can hear in the way that the music is composed that he's writing it for these new, crystal clear violins, the Stradivarius violins. Listen to this. It's so brilliant. And I don't mean that in the terms of like genius. I mean that in terms of bright. You think of metal strings, these steel strings, and the way that the sound cuts to the back of the hull, it's like ringing on this new frequency. This really set it apart from the Baroque period. Bach, Vivaldi, Corelli, those are dark, somber, soft, deep sounds. Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, these are incredibly different composers. So composers write for the instruments that are available to them. Composers write for the instruments that are available to them. So remember back to the very first day where I played 16 songs for you? And you all said, you tried to decide, is this classical music, is this not classical music? And I even played for you, I think it was a piece by Bach, performed on a mandolin, Chris Thiele, amazing virtuosic mandolin player. And we had this little bit of a discussion about how that couldn't be considered classical music because it wasn't performed on a violin or a cello or a viola, on the Stradivarius family of instruments. Right? Well, if we get to this period of classical music and violin, viola, and cello are fixed, they're the only instruments available to classical music, 300 years ago, 250 years ago, and composers are only composing for the instruments that are available to them, then what in the world has happened over the last 250 years, right? How can classical music ever continue to grow if we're only writing classical music for these instruments, right? And if these instruments, these classical instruments, are played in an arena outside of classical music, are they still classical or is it something else? So these are questions we have to ask. And if you were a composer today, like if you woke up tomorrow and decided, I'm going to be a composer, would you even want to write for this Stradivarius violin? I don't know. It's been done. It's been done for 250 years. Some part of me thinks we need to move on. So let me quickly tell you a little general theory of music that arises at about this time period. So before, back in Bach's time and previous, we basically have two camps of music making. One is sacred, so this is the music that happens in the church. I told you, like, the voices, the singing, the monks, that sort of thing. And then there's the secular, all the stuff that happens outside of the church doors that's, like, for fun. Like the music that we heard of the Gan people in Africa. So we have sacred music and secular music. The sacred music is controlled by the church. The secular music is whatever the people want to do in their off time. Once we get to the classical music period with Mozart, we move into this new phase. Now we have three categories. Sacred music kind of turns into what we call, quote-unquote, art music. So this is music that hoity-toity composers are writing, and they consider it to be good quality art. Then over here we have the folk music, the stuff that people still want to play on their own. Right? So this would be like banjo, folk, all that sort of thing. And then we have this other category called pop, popular music. So think about what you all brought today as your special listening. And consider which of these three categories you brought. 1812 Overture, Tchaikovsky, definitely art music. Mozart, art music. Bach, art music, Bach double. Vivaldi, art music. All of the composers that you think of as classical, they're all falling into this art music category. But there are these two other renegade categories called pop and folk, who are of the people and who you guys know now too. That's who's playing on the radio, on the non-classical stations. Right? It's like Bob Marley, Bob Dylan, Lady Gaga. And then in the folk category, this is people not performed, but stuff that people are just making in their own homes. So in my opinion, now folk music used to be the music of like Irish fiddle, Appalachian music. But now folk music is actually probably like house beats and like rap, like what people do together inside. So I just want to show you, I'll leave you with how now the Stradivarius violin has infiltrated pop and folk music as well, and I think a more interesting way than our modern classical music. So here's one in the early 1800s. The Stradivarius violin was taken to India through colonialization, but it was permutated into this amazing classical Indian music. I just want to show you an example of this. So it's the same make of instrument, but it's tuned differently, it's held differently, and it's played differently. It's part of this whole different genre of music. Here's another one, Irish fiddle. Held the same way, tuned the same way, but performed in different contexts. And then here's the last one I want to show you, and we'll finish after this. This is a guy named Mac Miller, famous rapper. Died a few years ago playing his Tiny Desk concert. And look who he invites to be part of his hip-hop song. Oh no.
All right, let's do it.
Sorry, guys. I'll have to leave it on a cliffhanger. We'll start class with that next time because we're out of time and I want you to really be able to hear it. And my technology is not working. But I want you to remember, classical music is not what's inside the boundary. We've got to break the boundary all the time. One of those ways is Baroque music, but one of those ways is also taking the classical violin and putting it in all these different amazing contexts. Okay, I'll see you next time. Have a great class. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.